lot of these youth, before going to the demonstrations, a lot of them did like a selfie video or sent a message to their parents, or said their final farewells to their parents before leaving the house, and they told their parents or like their loved ones that, look, I know I might not come back home, most likely, but I'm going because this is the right thing to do. So
welcome back to What Do We Do Next? I am looking forward to this conversation because I think it's a very, very important one. I am welcoming back Zolal Habibi to the show. She is a Iranian human rights activist and prominent voice for justice, democracy, and women's rights in Iran. She serves on the Foreign Affairs Committee of the National Council of Resistance of Iran, the NCRI, where she advocates globally for a free, secular, and democratic Iran. With over 2 decades of dedicated activism, she has become a fierce advocate on behalf of the voiceless inside Iran, regularly appearing on international forums, human rights conferences, and live broadcasts across the planet. I have had Zolal on the show before, so, and by the way, most listened to episode of the podcast, by the way, because I have been pushing it out over the last week or so to try to help with some of this misinformation around Iran, and so people are very interested in what you have to say. So thank you for taking time to come back and speak with me again, because I know you are very, very busy. There's a lot going on, even just since I went to sleep and woke up this morning. So welcome to the show, Zolal. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much for having me, and it's a pleasure to be here. I'd like to also greet the audience and those who are tuning in. So thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Iran is a big topic right now for a lot of reasons. And I mean, it's getting squeezed out of the news cycle in the United States constantly. It's like we're constantly having to bring it back because we have so much of our own stuff happening here that's just drowning out everything else, and it's really hard to keep up with what our insane president is doing in every moment. It feels like, what's he going to say next? What's he going to do next? But there's a lot of misinformation about Iran and what's going on. You're at a 14-day blackout, which is wild to me. I was doing some reading this morning, and it's like barracks internet, and I just have so many questions. Like, why is this software that's locking Iran out of the internet, in English, it all feels very messy to me. It is, so many people have been killed in the last couple of weeks, in the last 14 days, well, in the last 60 years, but in the last 14 days that's really ramped up, and I've saw numbers as high as 15,000. I've seen some that say 2,000. So I just sort of want to know from you, because you live this, you were born into this, you have been fighting your whole life. What do people need to know? What is the truth? What should we know?
Well, as you mentioned, just to give a small brief about what has happened, so we understand what are the circumstances that we're dealing with. As the world has seen, on December 28th, strikes broke out in Tehran's Bazaar. The Bazaar is the backbone of Iran's economy. It's kind of like the Wall Street of the US. So they play an important role, and also even historically, the point when the Bazaar entered the revolution back in 1979 was a turning point. So the fact that the Bazaar was coming to the streets and striking, that had very great significance historically, and also politically, and also economically. But the reality is that the situation in Iran is unbearable, and every aspect of it that you look at. What was very important was the fact that when the strikes began in the Bazaar, immediately within 24 hours, the students in different universities joined in solidarity, and that started spreading through the entire country. So all people from all walks of life, from different sectors of society, joined the protest. And I think this is something that sets it aside from previous ones. The fact that it started from Tehran and then it spread throughout the country. Eventually, over 220 cities were involved in the uprisings, and all 31 provinces. So in a very short time, it was able to spread. What was very important is that even though the original spark was due to the economic collapse of of Iran and the value of its currency, very soon, within the first few hours, the slogans were very clear, very direct, that they were targeting the entirety of the regime. So it went from down with the dictator to down with Khomeini to down with the oppressor, be it the Shah or the Mullahs. And so that those messagings were clear, that the people of Iran wanted to move forward and to overthrow this regime in its entirety, because there's no in reality, there's no hope for any kind of change within the regime. Even, I mean, the regime is incapable of even fixing some of the financial crisis that they're in. Or when you look at it, just about 2 months ago, the current president of Iran said that due to the water shortage crisis, they will probably have to evacuate all of Tehran. I mean, this is like the situation that people are living in. People don't have water, they don't have electricity in many hours of the day. I mean, Iran is a rich country in natural resources. This is something that is really next level, the situation that we're seeing. So there really isn't any. This is something I try to raise a lot. There's not one single point that you could put your finger on that is not on the verge of collapsing, or it has not been completely destroyed by the regime. So that is the situation. So very fast we saw people taken to the streets. I think one of the main characteristics everyone is touching on is you can see the organized resistance shine through in the demonstrations and the protests. You can see the fact that they're on the offensive because they're united, because they stand behind one another. They're organizing. They're not alone. So they're able to, like, for instance, disarm uh, some of the suppressive forces. We witnessed on January 7th that, like, for instance, 2 adjacent cities were liberated by the people. So all the suppressive forces, they were able to push them out of their city, and they were able to disarm many of them. So you saw that kind of resilience and that resistance, and the fact that they were organized, they were fighting back, they weren't just, standing. And I think that is what the regime feared the most, because the regime knows that at the end of the day, the only force that is capable of overthrowing this regime is the Iranian people. Because Iran, when you look at it historically, geographically, the geopolitics of everything, Iran is not a country that's going to be overthrown through foreign intervention. It can't be done. I mean, like, troops on the ground, we saw it in Iraq, but in Iran, it's not the same. Iran has a completely different geography. Like, it has different, I mean, even just based on the geography, it's very different. It's also 3 times the size of Iraq with 4 times the population. It's not going to be something like that. And the reality is that everyone knows that. Anyone who has a bit of understanding of what the situation in Iran understands that. We also saw the 12-day war in June. The reality is that the Iranian regime knows very well that the force that's going to overthrow it is the Iranian people. And that's when they see this extent of organizational structure on the ground, when they see people are responding back to fire, standing, and despite the fire, being killed on the streets, that sends its message. And that's why Khamenei learned his lesson from the Shah. The Shah was overthrown within an 18-month process. When he stopped execution and torture, he was overthrown immediately. Even though he also used brutal force, and he killed, like, for instance, just in one day, he had over 1,000 people killed in just Tehran during those protests. So they've learned that lesson, that if you don't do that, you're going to be overthrown. And that's exactly what Khamenei did here too. They opened fire on the protesters. As you've mentioned, the numbers vary because since that bloodshed started really that extensively, internet has been disconnected, so it's very difficult to verify. The Iranian resistance takes a lot of precautions in trying to make sure that they can verify the actual numbers. So that's why the numbers that we have announced is at least 3,000. But these 3,000 we know are verified. Over 50,000 people, based on reports that we have received, have been arrested, and thousands have been wounded. Many are being helped, being treated in their homes because families know that unfortunately the regime has raided hospitals, either killing people who were wounded or taking them away. And so it's for, a lot of even hospitals, when people would bring the wounded, they're like, please don't bring them here. They might come and kill them. So that is the current situation. And unfortunately, a lot of them, because they have been shot with, live ammunition, or like they were targeted in the face or the head area, they are in critical situation, but unfortunately they're not receiving the needed medical care. We have reports that the regime has actually gone to hospitals and taken away all of their blood banks, so they wouldn't be able to attend to the wounded who need blood transfusions. So this is like a regime that goes to that extent to, face its opposition. It's a very brutal regime, unfortunately. So that is what we saw today is day 14 of the internet shutdown in Iran. Right now, today, there were people here and there who have been able to connect, but very, very short, like maybe 10 minutes or something. So we are receiving a lot more videos and clips in the past 2, 3 days this way. It's been about 5 days that some phone lines are connected. They can't have incoming calls, but they can make outgoing calls. So even the extent of it wasn't just the internet that was shut down, it was also all forms of communication. So like, for instance, you wouldn't be able to send a text message to, your loved ones or friends, even when you were inside of Iran. Like, I was speaking to someone, she said it was my son's birthday. They live in 2 different provinces. She said I couldn't even send him a text or just to ask, like, are you alive? Where are you? What's happening? So that has been the situation. So a lot of families right now, they are trying to make contact with their loved ones because unfortunately since that day, they haven't been in contact. Some people are actually traveling to the cities that are in the border with other countries, crossing the border to just be able to connect and just give a message of, I'm fine, this is what's happening, and then go back. So that's how people are communicating these past few days. That is the current situation on the ground. But what's important is that the clashes are still continuing. So the protests are not in the form of like those large protests that we saw in some of the videos from the first 2 weeks, but they haven't died down. They're still continuing in different forms. Like, for instance, a lot of the funerals that are being held are turning to demonstrations against the regime. And that's why the regime is not allowing funeral ceremonies to be held. On the other hand, we see that, like, for instance, during the night, there are a lot of clashes in different cities, various cities across Iran. But we also, so that is the message that people keep on trying to give us, that it's still continuing. We haven't stopped despite the crackdown and brutalities of this regime. The people in Iran, I think they realize one thing, and this is also the lesson that they've learned from the previous uprisings. We have to push this till we reach the goal. Because if we stop now, the regime, I think President Zelensky made a very interesting point, raised a very interesting point. He said, if Iran succeeds, the message, not only for the regime, but for all dictatorships, is that if you kill ruthlessly, you can stay in power. And that is something that Iranian people have decided that we're not going to let that happen. All these lives that have been lost in the past few weeks, it's not in vain. We have to make sure that we can carry it through and see the overthrow of this regime. And I think that is the message that we're receiving, but also that is what you see in all the messages and all the videos and all of the calls that we're receiving from Iran is you see that resolve, that we're not going to stop, we're not going to give in, we're going to continue. And I think that's very important right now during these very critical times.
You know, something that you said to me on our last interview that just has stuck with me, and I've repeated it to so many people, is how 75% of Iran is like under 30 or 35. And I just like, I can't really get over that, you know? So, like, this unity that you're seeing across Iran and all of these different provinces, like, does this feels a little newer, like you said, like it's everybody this time, you know, kind of fighting against. To me, that feels like the most important part of this whole story, because we're seeing in the United States like so much division. They're just sowing division amongst us, and like people really hate each other, and they're not focusing on our regime, right? Like I'm not oppressing anybody. I'm not making anybody's groceries more expensive. You know what I mean? I'm not a leftist domestic terrorist, which I am now have been labeled. I'm a domestic terrorist because I voted Democrat. You know what I mean? There's no logic to it, right? And so it seems like that unity is the only thing that is going to topple them. Do you think that the regime is closer to being toppled, even though that everything is ramped up and there's so much more death? I mean, I know that you told me, you know, I think it was like 1,400 people had been executed in the 6 months prior to this uprising. So this is not a new thing. Do you think this is kind of the last grasp of the regime? Do you think that there's a sense of desperation there? Because I sense that from the United States government. It feels like they're grasping at straws and kind of on their way down. You know, do you get that feeling in Iran?
I think that what is very clear is that the regime does not have the capability to return to December 27th. No matter what they do, no matter how brutal they're able to crack down or even be able to, control the situation on the ground right now. Right now, what is interesting is that some of the regime's strategists and some of their, spokespersons have come to the scene, and they've been saying that if you think we're going to restore internet anytime soon, you're wrong. At least not till the Persian New Year. The Persian New Year is March 20th. Why? Because they say the minute that we reconnect internet, people are going to start organizing together, people are going to come to the streets again, and we can't control it. So the regime, you see that fear in the regime itself, and they know that they've reached a point of no return, really. As you said, that unity is really important. Unfortunately, right now, when you look among those who have their names and information has come out, those who have been killed, many of them are in their teens or like in their early 20s. So this is that Gen Z of Iran that's really coming through in this uprising, because you have to understand, not only themselves but their parents have seen nothing but this regime, and even their grandparents. None of them have seen freedom in Iran. They're all, they were under this dictatorship or the other one. They haven't seen anything else. And so this generation, they're really keen on one thing. And it's like, we want to move forward in the 21st century. We want a secular, democratic republic where there's people's sovereignty, where we can put a tyranny behind us, all forms of it, be it the Mullahs or the Shah and his Savak or whatnot. So that is like their clear message. Unfortunately, what you said about division is what dictators strive on. So the Iranian regime is after creating division among the people, and especially the protesters. Back in 2017, till 2017, the main division that the regime tried to use or manipulate was, hardliner or moderate within the regime, and creating these two camps, and that way making it look like there's a path for change. You could still oppose the regime but not be opposed to the entirety of the regime. There's like a reformist faction too. And that was the people put an end to that in the 2017 uprisings. Today, that division is now being led by calls for the return of monarchy to Iran. the people on the streets, they're united in overthrowing the regime. But then when some people come and try to manipulate it, or they try to come and create diversions really here, by saying that, oh no, we want the return of the Shah. So a lot of people are like, no, we don't want to return to the Shah. So it makes them passive. This was one of the major issues actually in this uprising. It took a while for instance, areas that have always been the most active in protests and uprisings to enter, like the Kurdish area or the Baluch or the Arabs. They weren't entering, and everyone was like, "Why?" The first day they're like, "We don't understand why," and they're like, "We don't want to return to another dictatorship. Why should we give the blood? Because we are the areas that are going to be suppressed the most. Let's be direct. We're the ones who have paid the highest price always, and when it comes in these protests and everything, and the most bloodshed is usually in our areas, because we are the minorities, we are the different ethnicities. We don't want a return to the previous dictatorship, which we were also the victims of. So this was like a key factor, and so it took a few days for people to realize that no, this is a national uprising. It has nothing to do with this faction or that faction, or no one can come and try to steal this revolution. This is a people's revolution. It is being led by the people, and it's being pushed forward by the people. And really, we saw the role of the rebellious youth and the resistance units on the ground who were organizing. So that's not something that can be stolen away from them. And I think that that was a major factor for people to start getting involved. But unfortunately, we are seeing that division card being played. We're also seeing this abroad, unfortunately, and this is creating this distrust, unfortunately, among a lot of Iranians. They're like, okay, there's a protest. Their automatic reaction is like, oh, I want to go, even abroad, I want to go in solidarity. But then they have to think, oh, who's organizing it? What is their flag? What are they doing? Who is it? What are their slogans? And this is creating that division. And so right now, like for instance, the Iranian resistance has been pushing through with one message. Look, no matter what your ideology or your beliefs or what your um, ideas are, but we can all come and agree on certain things. One, the regime needs to be overthrown in its entirety. It can't be reformed, it can't be changed, you can't negotiate with it, it needs to go. But two, right now you see a lot of demonstrations, they have the sign that says, no Shah, no Mullahs. Yes to democracy or a democratic republic or equality and freedom. These are like different slogans, but you are seeing that people are trying to draw that distinct line. Okay, we want democracy and a democratic republic, a secular democratic republic in Iran. This is something that everyone can actually hear. They can gather around the flag and they can come together. It doesn't matter if you're, you know, what your political leniency is. Do you agree on these basic factors that there needs to be people's sovereignty, there needs to be separation of religion and state, and there needs to be a democracy so there's no form of, dictatorship? This is something that everyone can agree on. And that is what we're seeing, especially in the past few days, we are seeing more and more of that. And especially because people felt like, hey, there are certain people who've been paying the price for change in Iran for decades, and then all of a sudden these people who have been, living their lives are, sweeping in to try to hijack it. That it doesn't work that way. I mean, that's not how history works really. And so I think that has taken a bit of a toll, but I think people are starting to understand that and they're coming together, and we're seeing like these, united fronts coming together. All, like for instance, yesterday I saw Amnesty International had held a demonstration for Iran in Sweden. And so like you saw people who were from like leftist groups or socialists. You saw people who supported the MEK. You saw people who were like the Kurds, the Azaris, the Baluchis, everyone coming together there with that one joint message. And so you see that unity. Or like, for instance, in different cities, like in Oslo, I saw that they had made, I saw a poster for a protest, which is tomorrow, with the same message. So you're just seeing that spread. In France, there was a huge demonstration last week with the same message. So you're seeing that solidarity fronts coming together, and I think that's really important. But what's also important is that we need to understand that, unfortunately, a revolution in a country like Iran, it's not something that happens overnight. It's unfortunately not something that can happen without a price. It's going to have a high price, and this is something that we are aware of, and that's something that I think our people have accepted to pay that toll. I think for me, it was very hard. I mean, it really was very, how should I say it? I was really touched, but also inspired by the messages that we saw from people. Like, a lot of these youth, before going to the demonstrations, a lot of them did like a selfie video or sent a message to their parents, or said their final farewells to their parents before leaving the house, because and they told their parents or like their loved ones that, look, I know I might not come back home, most likely, but I'm going because this is the right thing to do. So they they did that, fully understanding or fully grasping what the risks were, but they also understood why it's necessary, because no one's going to hand us freedom in a silver platter. We have a saying in Farsi, we say, no one's going to scratch your back except your own finger. So that is this thing, and that's what we've, unfortunately, Iranians have had the negative experience of that. I mean, just look at our history. And Reza Shah was brought in by the British, and then Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, he was brought in by the US and then taken out. And then Khomeini was brought in by the Western powers, because at that point it was the Cold War, and they thought that, oh, if we have, someone who's a fundamentalist, uh, he's going to stand in front of the USSR. Well, unfortunately, the people of Iran have paid for all of those foreign interventions, and those puppets who were brought in. But it is time that the people feel like we need to take our destiny into our own hands, and we have that capability and the capacity to bring about that change, because we have an organized resistance. There is a National Council of Resistance of Iran was formed for this day exactly, because it's an umbrella group that everyone can come and agree on, certain three basic rules, and then, let the ballot box decide the rest of it afterwards. So there's a 6-month interim government plan, and then the new constitution will be written, and there will be free elections. And I think that that is what the people of Iran see, and that is why they are willing to actually take those risks and come to the streets, and they understand, that these factors are key to make sure that we can make this revolution happen. But also, I think that everyone is saying that you saw this hope in people's eyes on the streets. You saw this perseverance and this resilience in them. I think that one of the things that has broken that fear in people's minds is the continuous activities of the resistance units in Iran, throughout Iran. I think that we have to understand that this also, right now, even with this uprising, for it to turn to a revolution, yes, there are going to be a lot of ups and downs. There are a lot of people who are going to come in. They think it's a sprint. They could come in and take it. It's not going to be that way, because it's going to have all these ups and downs that you have to move forward with. And I think that so it's like more like a marathon. So you have to prove, are you a marathon runner? But I also think that the Iranian people have seen in practice what they can trust, and I think that's really important. The fact that there is a resistance that, people who've dedicated decades of their lives for the freedom of Iran and not wanting nothing in return for themselves, not doing anything for themselves. So I think when you have that, you can rest assured that, your country will be in, they're not going to let it be stolen away by someone else. So that gives them that reassurance, and that that belief, that self-esteem as a collective self-esteem, not like an individual self-esteem, but that we can make this change happen. And I think that is something that's really important for us to reiterate and to raise.
Well, I definitely consider you one of those people. You have been in this your whole life. You know, you've been dedicated to the movement. You've risked your life. You've risked your freedoms. You've really built into this your whole life. And so you're a huge inspiration to me. And I can only imagine that there's a whole generation of people, well, generations of people being radicalized, and that little glimmer of hope is everything. It like almost makes me emotional because it's, we have so much division just everywhere. So it's like, to even get remotely to that goal of saying, well, can we at least agree on shouldn't kill people? Can we at least agree on some basics, and then we can figure out our differences later and realize that we're so much more alike than we've been taught, and we got to find that common ground. And so, talking about foreign influence, right now, like China is threatening Trump, Trump's threatening Iran. I mean, it's I can't keep up with what's going on. What should people know? When we're at dinner with our family members or friends and this comes up, what should we know about the foreign influence? Because, in talking to you, I understand the third option, and I'm always like advocating with what you taught me online and trying to repeat some of those talking points. But, a lot of people are like, oh, well, Iran couldn't overtake them. They need help. They need foreign influence, right? And so how should we understand this? How should we speak about Israel, China, the United States, and what's happening in Iran? What does the resistance want?
I think that the resistance wants what the people of Iran want. But I think when you want to put that into perspective, you have to look at the facts, not just on the surface. You have to, dive a bit deeper and see what are the consequences of each issue that is being stated, or the different, things that people say are on the table, right? Like, for instance, when it comes to, as you said, the third option, Mrs. Rajavi has been reiterating this time and time again for the past 20 years, that the solution to Iran, it's not going to be a foreign war or a policy of appeasement. Diplomacy is not going to change this regime, but neither is war. The solution is supporting the people of Iran. Well, to go a bit deeper into that, we saw, as I said, we've seen the policy of appeasement. Look at where we are today. Today, unfortunately, there's a great fight going on in the European Union right now over the blacklisting of the IRGC. Well, the European Parliament has called for the IRGC to be blacklisted for a few years now, with majority support. Unanimous support, really. But there are some certain countries who are dragging their feet in this regard. Some is because they have very strong economic ties with Iran, so they have interests in this regime. Others, they're actually afraid of Iran. They're afraid of Iran's terrorism, its hostage diplomacy. They actually have hostages right now in Iran, so they're worried about Iran's retaliation. But either way, they're both same side of, they're two sides of the same coin. At the end of the day, when you don't have a firm policy on Iran, it's giving that green light to the regime that, okay, the more I bully, the more I kill, the more brutal I am, I can stay. That's the message. So it's a green light. It serves as a green light. And then we saw, like, for instance, even right now, they hear the words of condemnation, but they say, look, yes, I know you have to do that. It's diplomatic. You have to condemn us. But at the end of the day, you have no problem with us staying in power because you're not even willing to put us on the terrorist list. Even though that, the IRGC is the backbone of all this suppression, but you're fine with it. That's the message. So we're seeing how appeasement has played a role in this whole process in all of these years. But we also saw the 12-day war. At the end of the day, that's not something that's going to overthrow a regime. You could take out a single person, but this regime is not like it's a system, right? They have, Khomeini died, Khamenei replaced him. It's not something that's going to be, it's not even like the Shah that when you take out the Shah, the whole system falls apart. They have a whole system there. So that's also not the solution. And also the people of, I don't think any country wants to see its own people being bombed and killed. It's not something that we want. And then to have to like feel like, okay, they bombed you, but then you owe them because they actually did something for you. No, we don't want that. So this is very clear. But that third option, it doesn't say that the international community should just step back and just watch. It's asking for a firm policy on Iran. It's saying there is a lot that you can do. You can have a proactive role here. Just don't meddle. There's a difference between supporting and meddling, right? So supporting would mean blacklist the IRGC, recognize the people's right to resist and to fight back. Right now, it's been today's 14 days that people in Iran don't have communications. Governments can restore Iran's communication lines. They can do that with technology today. That's something that's like easily doable, but no one's doing it, right? So restore their communications and provide them, help in this regard, and hold the regime accountable. Like, how is it that the regime kills thousands and thousands on the street, and then the World Economic Forum invites Araghchi, the foreign minister, to come and speak in Davos? They would have gone through with it, except that the Iranian, especially the Iranian diaspora, started, raising their concerns, and they started protesting it, and that's when the day that Araghchi was supposed to arrive, they canceled his speech that day. And that was only because of pressure. If we hadn't put that pressure, he would have come. And what is the message to the regime? That, okay, we can.
Good job.
Yeah, we could move forward. I mean, just right now, isn't that like the message that unfortunately one of the another regime really that has also given that message that Iran did good. They really were able to control the situation by suppression. That is the message for dictatorships. So I think that this is when we need to realize that it is to everyone's benefit to support the Iranian resistance and the organized resistance and the people of Iran to create that change. Even no matter from what aspect you look at it, even if you look at it from your interests, it'll be to your benefit to have, a stabilizing force instead of the number one state sponsor of terrorism being ruling Iran. So that is what it is there. But also, I think it's really important to understand a lot of, since yesterday, if you look in the media, especially in the US, they've been saying, one of the reasons that the US is not acting is because they're not sure about what comes next. So this is what the regime also tries to feed on, that if I don't stay in power, there's going to be chaos the day after, and there's going to be like civil war because Iran has like all these different ethnicities, and then just look at the fights that are breaking out between the different Iranian groups abroad, this, that. So that is the situation. So it's better off for me to stay in power than to have that instabilizing force, coming into Iran, and to have, these civil war breakout or whatever that scenario, like Iran will become the next Iraq and Libya or Syria or whatnot. Well, that's also not the case. Because again, when it comes to Iran, there's a third option. And you don't have to choose between that and worse. You don't have to choose between the current regime and returning to the monarchy and the Savak and, the suppressive rule of the Shah. The third option is moving forward to have a, as I said, secular democratic republic, to have elections under the control of the the United Nations, and to hold that and have, people's sovereignty from us. Iran is the number one country in brain drain. Just imagine if all of these people could serve their own country. Iran could become like a stabilizing force and like something that could really help build the future. It could be a leading country, but right now it's not. So just allow them that space to be able to create that. That's all we're asking. We're not asking for you to, invest in anyone or to do this or that. We're not asking for anything. We're just asking, first of all, don't prop up fake alternatives that don't have, I mean, alternative has specific characteristics. I think we spoke about this in the last podcast. Like, it has to have some kind of an organizational structure, because it can't be a one person rule. It has to have something, it has to have like departments, it has to have like a plan, it has to have like people who take on those responsibilities, right? So it needs to have structural organization that has proven the test of time too. It needs to have a laid out roadmap, a plan. What are the basic laws for that 6 month interim government? Are you going to keep the current laws of the regime until the new constitution comes out, or do you have something to replace it for that time? What are the principles and the values that it stands for? What are those core, amendments or whatnot that you stand for? And then do you have, I mean, what does you have to have some kind of a resume of doing something for the people, everyone. You can't, it's this is something that has been going around a lot in the social media platforms of the Farsi social media platforms. But the reality is that like there are some people who are propping up Reza Pahlavi, the return of the Shah. Well, this guy, he hasn't worked a day in his life, one single day. He can barely, I mean, his let alone that his daughters can't even speak Farsi, because like that's not an issue to them. But aside from that, I don't even care about his children. He was on vacation till day 10 of the uprising in Bahamas, and he didn't cut his vacation short because there's an uprising in his country. And now he says, I am the chosen leader of these people. I'm like, hello? We have the video from last year. You said, I'm not willing to sacrifice my own freedom for the freedom of the people of Iran. So these people are sacrificing their lives for the freedom of their people. You're not even willing to sacrifice your vacation for the freedom of the Iranian people. And now how are you supposed to be leading them? Like, what is that? And then someone who doesn't even stand for like, for once, give a direct answer. Do you support a democracy in Iran or a monarchy in Iran? Like it's a very simple question. Are you? But he kept saying, people ask me to be the leader, and let's not get into titles now. It's not titles. It's two different paths. You have to choose a path. You can't play both cards and be like, oh, I am like. In one scenario, he's saying, well, my merit is the fact that I'm the son of my father. Well, your father was a dictator that was thrown out. So
Yeah,
that's no merit to stand on.
not
The
great.
second
Yeah.
is saying, I am someone who's, a democratic person or whatever. So where is your resume? What have you done? Have you formed an organization? Are you able to create, he has not been able to create one organization that lasts more than 6 months. So, with what, I mean, there was an article actually that came out in one of the US outlets that was interesting to me. They did a comparison. They said even Chalabi, who was brought into Iraq, he actually had some work experience, but it wasn't enough. So look what happened. Well, someone who hasn't worked a day in his life, how is he going to be running a country like Iran? And you know what? It just doesn't work that way. It's not all about Instagram photos or like doing different videos each day and trying to present yourself as the heir to the peacock throne. It doesn't work that way. That era is gone, and the people of Iran revolted for a reason. I mean, just a few days ago was the anniversary of the day that the Shah fled Iran, and so people had this hashtag. It said, "The Shah left, the Mullahs will leave too." And that is the reality. I mean, in history, have you ever seen a dictatorship be recycled again? I mean, it doesn't happen. I saw a few tweets in France, especially the French. They were non-Iranians. They're like, you know what? Raising this as a possibility, it's like, just imagine someone coming to them, because it's been 50 years since Franco was overthrown in Spain, right? His dictatorship. Just imagine someone comes today and says, let's return the son of Franco. Is that even something that occurs to you in your mind? No. So why is it different when it comes to Iran? So I think that is why it's that unifying slogan right now among Iranians is the no Shah, no Mullah slogan, because the rest of the things, if we draw a line between the people and dictatorships, there's a lot of things that we can, you know, work out, or there's also a lot of unifying forces here. So I think that is a line that we always have in our resistance. We've always said there's always just two sides: the people and those who are opposed to the people. So you have to draw that line and see where on the spectrum each person falls. And I think that is a message that I think very soon the world will realize, because you can't just change with the times. I mean, you're like, one of the things is like, a lot of people are pulling up his speeches and messages from previously. First of all, one of the things that he does do right now is, for the most part, a lot of his messages are copied from the messages of like Mrs. Rajavi or whatnot, and just said in a different words. But when she says it, she has like, it comes from like a history, and it's a path. But when he says it, there's no background on it, so it just doesn't go. But that's fine. But one of the things is like the fact that he keeps on changing his messaging. Like, for instance, he keeps on saying that uh, we have his videos. He says, revolution is not in my vocabulary. I depend on the IRGC for the future of Iran and the current military and suppressive forces. And then he says, oh, let's blacklist them now, because that's what's popular now. That's what Iranians are calling for. Or like, for instance, the fact that this is a revolution and this is the price of a war and whatnot. So I'm like, okay, so you said it wasn't part of your vocab, and what happened there? And then he says, those who say we will not forgive or forget, they want to create revenge and whatever. And now he's like, we will not forgive and we will not forget. I'm like, okay, so what happened to what you said before? And the whole issue of, he did an interview last year, and he says, well, for the last 4 decades, my life has been here. My family is here in the US. And all my friends and everyone is here. I don't have any connections to Iran. So now all of a sudden, how has that changed? Um, and the people are just sick of these. They're not. They're not just. This isn't a game. It's people's lives, and it's the history of a country. Either stand your ground and clear your position, or just get out of the way. And the other thing is, after 40 years, he has decided to give a roadmap now. It's about 170 pages, and it's a blueprint for um, it's a dictatorship. It's startling, actually, because it's even worse than his father's. Because he says, first of all, I will be in power for, first he says, for 3 years, but then I can extend that for another 3 years, until like things come together. And then he says there will be martial law in all major cities for 20 months. And then the Savak will be revived, and it will be connected directly to me, responding directly to me. Even during his dad's time, it was responding to the prime minister. Then, like, these things that it has in it, oh, we are going to revive the Eternal Guards. Eternal Guards during the time of the Shah was equivalent to the IRGC today. It was the suppressive forces that actually, during the revolution, they were the ones who were killing people on the streets. So he's just going to change the name of the IRGC back to the Eternal Guards, and this is the plan. So I mean, if anyone actually reads that plan, it's like, my thought was, everyone always says that in regards to Hitler, if people had actually read Mein Kampf, they would have understood what is coming. With Khomeini, he had a book that everyone said if anyone had actually read that book before, they would have known what is coming. And today, if anyone actually reads this plan, they'll know that this is a roadmap for tyranny, and that is something that's not acceptable for the Iranian people at this point. And so, um, I think now more than ever, it's very refreshing to see the statements and the message of Mrs. Rajavi. She has, I mean, this is something that a lot of people ask. They're like, well, there's no mention of your name right now anywhere. That's because you have to understand what that comes with. Because the Iranian resistance understands that you have to concentrate right now on pushing the revolution forward and the uprising forward. Um, it's not an issue of whose name is mentioned, because
Right,
that's not
declaring your
our issue. Our
yeah.
issue is to make sure that we can safeguard people's lives on the ground, that these resistance units can push forward and they can move. And look, I mean, if anyone who understands a bit about Iran, they see their characteristics right now. And this, everyone is saying these demonstrations are different from everything that we've seen, but that main characteristic everyone touches on is organized resistance on the ground, forces that are on the offensive. Well, where does that come from? Is that not the resistance units? So that's speaking for itself. And we're not after power. That's the key. We are after overthrowing this regime and giving that power, transfer of power to the people of Iran. So that is why instead of going around and doing interviews to just mention ourselves, what we're doing is we're concentrating on making sure that these protests continue and that people can be safeguarded and that this path continues till the overthrow of the regime.
Well, it's interesting because in the United States we have Project 2025, and it's very similar. It's like if anybody read it, they would have known what was coming, and here we are. You know what I mean? They're laying these things out in front of us. We're just refusing to believe them or read it or understand what's coming, and so there's just so many parallels. The one thing that I really wanted to ask you, because I think about you all the time, like you and Zara, but especially you, because the last time we spoke, you told me that you did a hunger strike for, I can't, how many days was it?
72.
So, I'm Irish, and we have the H block. We have like the hunger strikers that like fought against our own, problems and the troubles in Ireland. And I've always been very inspired by that. And when you told me that, I'm so taken aback by like how much of a personal, and I know you don't like any of this, but like how much of a personal sacrifice you've made, how much you've worked, how much you've given, how you've been born into this. And so what I really want to ask you today is, because I find myself like really angry a lot, like I just like, I'm a very emotional but logical person. So when things don't make sense, I get very upset. You know what I mean? And I know that about myself. And so many things just don't make sense. And, I got some death threats yesterday, and it's like I don't even care because I'm in another country. But it just made me realize, like, we're all living in this state of constant nervous system like dysregulation, right? And it's on such a small scale with the United States right now. And like you have been living this your entire life. And so how are you managing this? Like, what would you say to the people that are like want to get involved but are finding themselves overwhelmed or finding themselves in this place? What do you have to say? Because your resolve just seems so incredible to me, and it's probably all and you can't imagine anything else. But that has to take a toll on you, So how do you get up and fight every day? How do you not let all of this get to you and impede you? Because I don't always express my anger. I just get mad at people and then call them names. And I'm like, well, that wasn't productive at all. I didn't accomplish anything. I'm only sowing more division, which is what I don't want to do. So what would you say to the revolutionaries out there in the world, wherever they are, representing themselves, their country, Iran, whatever it might be? What would you say to them?
I think one thing that always grounds me is thinking about, just keeping your eye on the target, that goal, that final goal that you have, and that in itself helps a lot. It pushes out a lot of the noise. Just so keep your focus and don't lose your focus from what is the ultimate goal. And that is, like, for us, it's the freedom of the Iranian people. Others will come and go. There's going to be a lot of rhetoric, there's going to be a lot of noise, there are going to be a lot of obstacles along the way, but just keep that focus. Also, one of the things that these days, it, I guess, I think about it a lot, but it also is both inspiring, but also brings up a lot of responsibility, is the price that the people in Iran are paying, the sacrifices that are being made. Just seeing these young, as I said, teenagers, early 20s, going with it like full force with this heart full of hope and inspiration. I think that it's on us to make sure that their lives are not lost in vain. And it's, the fact that it's not just one generation, it's like generation after generation. All like, if you look at, we have a book, it's the size of, unfortunately, a phone book. It's like this big, but it's volume 1 of those who have been killed by the regime. So the names of about 20,000 people who have been killed by the regime. When you look at this book, when you look at every page, to some, it might be a number when we say 120,000 people have died for their beliefs in Iran. It might be a number when we say 2,200 people have been executed in 2025 alone. It might be a number that 347 people have been executed in the last month in Iran, despite the protests that are going on. So aside from that, and but these are all people who had a story. When you look at their faces, you look at their images, and they're like, most of them are usually under the age of 30 when they were killed. So that brings a responsibility. What is your responsibility in face of all of this? What are you going to do to make sure that this cycle doesn't continue? And I think that really helps me put everything else aside, because it's really not matter. It doesn't matter who, like, this politician says that or that group says this. At the end of the day, they don't really matter. What matters is, like, what am I going to do? What is my responsibility personally in regards to all of these lives lost? And also, what is my responsibility in face of our history and our future? And I think that is like that driving force, because there are a lot of things that, as I said, they're just noise, but they can really pull you down. So just push those away and just concentrate on the path forward.
I think that's really helpful information. And I think maybe part of the problem is like, we don't really have a goal in the United States. We don't have a clear, you know what I mean? Like, some people love the government, some people don't, and we're being influenced by bots. And like, we don't really have a clear goal. We don't have that. And so it's easy to feel like lost in the mess of it all, because there isn't a goal. There isn't a thing to aim at.
Yeah. I think I've probably told you this before, but I think that I've always considered myself very lucky to be part of a generation that can have, I mean, to be born in an era where we actually have this issue in our country that I can, concentrate on. And the fact that I live in a time that I have a role model like Mrs. Rajavi in front of me that I can look at and I could draw inspiration from, and she could, show us the ropes of how to move forward and to be able to do that. And the fact that, just even in the darkest hours, in the hardest situations, she always sees, that bright future ahead, and that's what she concentrates on. And that is what she, is able to create that momentum in all of us that move forward, onwards to victory, onwards to freedom, onwards to democracy. And I think that is really inspiring for me. And I hope that more and more, I guess the world will be able to learn about it and to be able to really, I think that a lot of these solutions could be replicated for a lot of other issues, even in our personal lives or in the bigger picture. But I think that we can derive a lot from these experiences and learn from them and to use them in our daily lives. And I think that with that, step by step, we can make the world that we're living in a better place, and to be able to create those, steps forward, even at times that it just seems like everything is falling apart.
Well, I love that, and I don't want to misquote her, but I think the quote is "We can, and so we must."
Yes, exactly. We can and we must.
And we can and we must, and that's like that's the core of who I am, and it always has been. So that really like resonated with me. Like, if you can, you should. If you can, you must. If we can, we must. And I really feel that. And so she's an inspiration to me as well. Ironically, I'm sure she's an inspiration to people all over the world. And it gives me hope that there's a woman at the head of that. And this, Iran that has been painted as this country that hates women or whatever. You have chosen a woman to lead you into the next era. And that, it's a good reminder to not believe everything that you see, not listen to all the people in your life that are wildly uneducated, not to repeat the things that you hear, and to go look for yourself, because you might be pleasantly surprised. I know whenever I tell people about our conversation and everything you've taught me, they always go, "Oh, wow, I didn't know that." And I go, "I know, isn't that cool? Or isn't that terrible about, how many young people, And so just being able to spread a little bit of that better information and more of that hope, because, I definitely am inspired by you and everything that you've done in your lifetime. And like I said, I know you don't really like to get compliments and all that, because that's not your jam, but, it matters, it really does. And I know that, a lot of people are listening to these episodes and hopefully taking something good with them and a little bit of inspiration. And I know personally, like, I will try to yell at less people today on the internet and spend more time thinking about what is the goal, what are the things that we can agree on, and then maybe just focus on that. And sometimes, when you boil the cabbage, the dirt comes to the surface, right? And I think right now, like, the dirt is coming out, and, I think it was hidden for a long time, and now it's on the surface, and now we're going to deal with it, right? One of my clients says, you can't clean the kitchen if you don't see the dirt. Well, we're seeing all of the dirt, and what we do with it next matters. And in my core, as frustrated and hopeless as I feel sometimes, I do believe that, like, at the end of all of this, because it feels like a worldwide awakening, like Ukraine, Iran, the United States, this is a global thing. Everything, the Make America Great, Make Ukraine, like, all of this is all related. And I think it's just time to bring it to the surface so that we can eradicate it completely and move into a new world that is better and more fair. I just think it's going to be a lot more sacrifice, and more sacrifice from an uneven amount of sacrifice from different people. And I think that once the United States suffers a little bit more, that maybe we will find our unity instead of being so divided. But I will continue to look, for inspiration from the revolution and the teachings and the sacrifices. And I too have seen all those posts online about all the younger people, they're doing little memorials, like on Threads. There's a lot, and it's just, it makes me sad, but it gives me hope, right? Because, like, it's all about the youth, right? Bob Marley says, tell the children the truth, right? And they've been told the truth. And so, yeah, we can't let them die in vain. So I appreciate that.
Thank you very much. I greatly appreciate your time, and it's always a pleasure to have these conversations with you. And we hope that together we can see the dawn of a new era, and one with prosperity and peace and democracy for everyone.
One can only hope. Well, count me in, send me a jersey or whatever I need. And who knows, maybe one day we'll get to go to Iran, and I'll meet you there, and we'll have tea or something. I don't know.
Hopefully
maybe one day, get some good kebab, because, that's my jam. But thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate it. I know you're so busy. I know you have so many things going on right now. But thank you for your time. All of your links and everything will be in the show notes. And, of course, if you want to come back at any point in time and do another one of these and give us some more information, my studio is always open to you, because I really, really value these conversations. They've been like a lighthouse in the storm for me. So thank you.
Thank you very much. I greatly appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to What Do We Do Next? Please share this information. If you know people that are having conversations that don't align with what you've just heard, Zolal has been in the resistance her entire life. This is decades of work. She is inside of it. Believe what you are hearing here. Take it for what you will. Go research this, and let's have better conversations around this because, there is no difference between Iran and the United States. And if you can listen to these interviews and not put those things together, then you are not paying enough attention. And so this is where we are headed if we don't stop these things. There are so many similarities. So please share this information. Hit me with any questions. If you'd like to be connected to Zolal, let me know, or Zara, let me know. I'm happy to help. I don't care if there's any cost to me or not. This is more important than anything else. So thank you for your time. Please like, subscribe, and we'll catch you on the next one.